This is Stephen Kotler, and you're listening to Your Superior Self.
This is Christina Rasmussen, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Dave Meltzer, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, I'm Anita Murjani, and this is Your Superior Self.
Hi, this is Paul Selig, and this is Your Superior Self.
What's up, everybody? I'm Aubrey Marcus, and this is Your Superior Self.
What is up, beautiful people? Welcome back. I'm Trey Downs, and this is Your Superior Self. Thank you for taking the time to download. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I think you're really going to enjoy this one because I have two amazing women on the show, Catherine A. Weissenberg and Jocelyn Montanaro, who are co-authors of the new book, Beyond Ever After, a heart-to-heart journey through death and the afterlife. Yes. Great book. Funny story, though. So I read this book a couple of months ago, and I could not figure out. I don't know. I went to Catherine's website, left a message, and nothing came of that, right? Like, I get it. Things get lost in the mail. I get it. But then a publicist reached out to me and just asked if I would have them on the show. And I was like, yes, immediately get them on here because the book is amazing. It's a love story between Jocelyn and her husband, Kevin. Kevin's in a coma, and Catherine comes in and helps Jocelyn through the entire process of her husband transitioning over to the afterlife. And it's such a powerful story. It's truly a love story. And just another example of how our loved ones are always with us. And it's a very powerful interview. It's a very powerful conversation. And I'm very excited that you guys are listening to this. I think you're really going to enjoy it. But here's a little sample of what's to come.
Going through this experience and not just losing Kevin, but Kevin walking her, holding her hand through this experience. And the book does that, but all the years, I mean, we've done 54 writings or something, and there's 6 in the book. So he was the faith-filled one. He was the believer. She was like, I don't believe in any of this. And so he wanted her to have that belief system. That's what he wanted her to have, hope and faith and belief. And, he managed to do that. I mean, spirit, his blessing, whatever, however fate and the universe collided, she got this experience and he was the one who delivered it to her. And he knew all her areas of resistance and he knew, and he walked her through it. And so it was a horrible loss, but his goal, his desire was to see her transformed. And sure, it came in a really crazy kind of way that seems so like, really? This really happened? It's a totally true story.
Yeah. Yes, that is so powerful. And to give you a little more context about the authors, I'll read you their bio. So Catherine A. Weissenberg, for several decades, has been sharing her unique ability to communicate and dialogue with God, the deceased and coma patients. And to retain a lasting record of these communications, Catherine writes these dialogues longhand as they occur and calls them writings. In actuality, she connects with the stream of universal consciousness and transforms that energy into prose. When asked to explain her gift, Catherine states, and I quote, "I believe God and those we love are always in our midst. There is a God, a consciousness, a stream of love that runs within all of us. I'm able to connect and transform this flow into words which all of us can understand. This energy, I like to refer to it as love stream, is ever present for everyone." Very powerful stuff there. And Jocelyn Montanaro considers herself a reluctant messenger. She loved her relatively traditional life as a wife, mother, and part-time lawyer, and she would not have traded places with anyone in the world. There were only 2 areas that Jocelyn didn't share with Kevin, her husband, and that was a belief in God and an active involvement in organized religion. And Jocelyn never thought that she would be writing a book about accepting God's love and communicating with the dead. That was more likely, her being elected Pope was more likely than this book coming to fruition. So yeah, those are the odds that Jocelyn would ever be involved in this type of project, and she is. And this is very important to get out to the world. This is very her life is in this book, and I thank Jocelyn and I thank Catherine for coming together and putting this together and putting it out there for you guys to read. It's very personal for Jocelyn. It's very transparent. It's very intimate, and I know that it's not easy to put this type of literature out there into the world, but Jocelyn, good job on that for sure. I'm excited. I'm excited about this conversation. I'm excited about you guys listening to this. And yeah, but before we get into that, I want to talk about my sacred activism mission. Again, coined by the poet and mystic Andrew Harvey. Sacred activism is what breaks your heart out there in the world, and then you go out there and you try to be a service to that, whether it's bringing awareness to whatever that mission is, or going out and actually putting in the hours to contribute to that mission. My mission is helping and bringing more awareness to children suffering. So that's why I want to recognize the great organization Cool Kids Campaign. Their mission statement, or their mission, is devoted to improving the quality of life for pediatric oncology patients and their families by focusing on the academic, social, and emotional needs brought on by a cancer diagnosis. And that's why I want to bring more awareness to them. These kids, they deserve to feel like kids, cool kids. They deserve the attention and love that kids get every day, and because they get hit with these diagnoses, doesn't take any of that away. And I love this campaign because they give love and support to these families and these children, and it's a great organization. Please head over to coolkidscampaign.org and give what you can, time, money, whatever it is. These kids deserve it. So yeah, but before you head over there, well, actually, you know what, after you head over there, go to my website. Let me know if you guys have any other organizations around the world that need to be brought more attention to, more awareness to, children suffering, children that need to be helped in any certain or type of way. I really want to bring more awareness around that and try to be some help in that aspect. So go to traydowns.com, leave me a message, let me know your thoughts. I really appreciate all the support that I get for this show, and from the authors to the publicists to you, the listeners and the audience. Like, it's just so surreal when I'm able to do this and put more awareness out there for the collective consciousness, and more positivity, more positive energy for everyone that may need it the most. So thank you guys. And I really do appreciate just you listening. So thank you guys. So with that said, guys, let's get into this. Let's get after it. Let's talk about this book. Let's talk about this story, Beyond Ever After. The great and the powerful Catherine A. Weissenberg and Jocelyn Montanaro.
Hi, my name is Jocelyn Montanaro. I'm the co-author of Beyond Ever After, and this is Your Superior Self.
Perfect.
And I'm Catherine Weissenberg, the other co-author of Beyond Ever After, a heart-to-heart journey through death and the afterlife. And we're here with Trey Downs and excited to be on Your Superior Self.
Excited. I can't even tell you how excited I am. Like I was telling you guys earlier, I found you earlier before I found your publicist, and was reading your material and loved the story, loved everything about it. And luckily, fate had it in my reality to connect with you two, and this is awesome. So thank you both for taking the time. This is unique because it's both of you on here at the same time, and this is one amazing book. So I want to go ahead and just kind of dive into Jocelyn's story, because you are the backbone of this, right, Jocelyn? I mean, this story is a love story about you and your husband, Kevin. Why don't you give us some context in that? Like, how did this book start?
Well, I like to think that Kevin's the backbone of the story, but thank you for saying that. The book started when my husband was in a coma at UCLA following surgery to remove a brain tumor. He had a hemorrhagic stroke afterwards, and he was in a coma. And my sister knew Catherine and had been encouraging me to do a writing with her. And I was hesitant to do it, but finally did. And during that writing, while my husband was in a coma, I was able to communicate with him through Catherine.
What were you open to that though? Like, were you like, all right, I'll try that. Like, or were you like, I'm absolutely not doing that?
No, I wasn't open to it at all. In fact, I had, I'd heard about Catherine and her gift, didn't really believe it. And, but my husband had been in a coma for 26 days, and I really was all out of ideas and hope. I had no idea what I should do and shouldn't do. And I really just needed to, I wanted to talk to him, but, which was impossible. And my sister just kept encouraging me to do a writing with Catherine because she has communicated with people in comas before. And finally, I just figured, what do I have to lose? And I gave it a try. And I was just shocked when my husband started communicating through Catherine.
What was the first thing that she said that you realized it was Kevin?
He said, "It's me, Kevin." He did. I mean, I was like, well, Catherine said, "I hear a man's voice." And I said, "Who is it?" And he said, it's me, Kevin. Like, duh, So, and then that went on to him talking about what his experience was. He thought he was dreaming, but the conversation was so specific. And I say conversation, that's not really an accurate representation of it, but it was so specific. I had no doubt in my mind that I was communicating with my husband, who was in a coma. And it's you're so adamant that you believe something is one way, and then you have an experience and you immediately shift to the other way. And it was just a instantaneous thing. As soon as I knew it was him, I couldn't believe it, but I just went with it from there.
Mm-hmm. And it would be helpful to note for your viewers that Jocelyn is an attorney, and her husband Kevin was an attorney, a mediator. So Jocelyn is not a gullible kind of gal at all, as you'll see when the interview goes on. And anyway, so she asked a test question, and maybe you might want to mention that test question. And that's when she was like, okay, this is legit.
What was the test question?
Well, at first he talked about some things that, he mentioned my kids by name and asked what they were doing and a few other general things. And I thought, my sister Vicky could have told Catherine those things. And so I asked him what the last thing was that he remembered. And what he said was, "I remember getting wheeled into the surgery and reaching up and taking Linda's hand and saying, 'Thank you for doing this, Linda.'" And I nearly fell off my chair because after the surgery, you know how surgeons come out and tell you how it went when you're a family member and you're waiting for them at the hospital. And she came out to tell me how the surgery went. And she said, "Everything's fine. But before I get started on the details, I just got to tell you, your husband's the nicest man. As we're wheeling him in, he reaches up and grabs my hand and says, 'Thank you for doing this, Linda.'" And the only people that heard it were myself and my two kids. And I didn't repeat it to anyone or didn't share it with anyone. One, because it was just something so typical that he would say, and it wasn't out of the ordinary. And two, because half an hour later, an artery tore in his head. He had this huge stroke and everything started going downhill. And honestly, I just never really thought about it again until he said that was the last thing he remembered. And then he went on to talk about the music we listened to on the drive down and the conversation we had the night before. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was talking through Catherine with my husband, who'd been in a coma for almost a month.
Man, that is amazing. Catherine, how did you start realizing you had this gift?
Well, I mean, I was in grad school studying to get an advanced degree in communication studies, and these just very strange things started happening. And I would kind of get like, say this to a stranger, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. And we like kind of like, say it, it would be this urge, kind of, I say, but like when you think a thought, are you hearing sound? I don't know, and I would eventually just go up to a table in a restaurant and say like, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch or whatever, but the blue car by the trundle bed. And people would like look at me, and the person would start crying and having these reactions. And I'd be like, okay, bye. Because I didn't know what it was. I was so embarrassed and so humiliated. And I would like almost want to run out of wherever I was. And that continued to happen. And it always meant something to the people. And, I thought, oh, this is evil, or I mean, what the heck, but I knew that I couldn't get total strangers that I did not know to collude with me in my like insanity or delusion. And so it was just there was a lot of wild rides in there, till I had to come to grips with it. It's like, I don't know how this works. I don't know what this is exactly, but I can't deny that it's real and it's happening. So I just sort of went with that, but it was and that's been like 33 years ago. And
well, so you do some stuff in longhand too, right? So you write things out. Is that correct? It's all longhand. So you
yeah, but it's not automatic writing. It's not like I'm a zombie and like, oh, like my hands just moving. I'm fully present. I am sensing the person's energy, and for whatever reason, I'm able to turn that into prose, into words. And it's so fast and furious. Jocelyn can tell you that there'd be no way that I could write it as fast as it's coming. And so.
Wow, that's interesting. And then you also said it was, it's coming from the person, well, I guess it was coming, right? And there's something about either God or unnamed source. Like, what is that?
So the writings always begin, God welcome, like Jocelyn, or God welcome Trey. And it always ends with go with God. So my understanding is this God energy. This is this, and I don't get hung up on if people are triggered by God, or you want to call it universal love or source or whatever. But that big source energy. And then at times people will drop in. I call it dropping in because it's sort of like that. It's like all of a sudden they're there, and so yeah. So, and the writings always have an introduction, always have a conclusion, always are beautiful, and are just unlockers of energy and blocks people have.
Wow. So. I have a feeling you turn a lot of non-believers into believers after they have a meeting with you. I mean, just from the book. I mean, it's like Jocelyn, you're very analytical, right? You're very materialistic in this book. And then,
right. And you can tell I'm not like Jocelyn shares in the book about thinking I was going to have incense and bangles, and I'm a really smart, professional, well-educated, girl from the Midwest, live in California for the last 35 years, but just a normal person.
Sure.
So
no bangles.
No bangles. Do you like my Young Living oils, essential oils? I have to say.
How do you? All right, so I feel like a lot of us, and Jocelyn, you may agree, disagree, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of us have these type of gifts, right? Like we are able to raise that consciousness that we can communicate on the other side. I know that I have experienced some meditations where I felt like I've connected with past loved ones, and Christina Rasmussen is an author that I've read, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with her work. There's a meditation that she does, talks about going to the other side and having communications with loved ones, and then proving it to yourself by bringing things back from the non-physical. and things have manifested for myself. Like I can attest to that. Just not anything crazy, but like I've a knife that my grandfather gave me in one of my meditations, like a knife that he gave me in that meditation, I later found a month ago at a beach house that we went to. Like it was just sitting there randomly, and I'm like, holy crap, there's this knife that my grandfather gave me. So like I feel like there are things that you can do, and people may not want to hear this because we've been programmed not to think like this and it's bad. But I feel like we can do things in our everyday lives to raise our consciousness, get that frequency high enough where we too can connect with some type of source. What are your
I
thoughts?
mean, absolutely, Trey, completely. And that is part of this is when we, are out speaking about the book pre-COVID, of course, are on shows talking. eh, many people have had these experiences like you're describing, and it's sometimes it's the most intimate experience of your life, because it's real and you're connected with your loved one. And I think we all have that capacity, but in our society there's not a lot of like me. I mean, I'm like, am I losing my mind? Is this evil? I mean, I went straight to my culture that says, whoa. So my rational mind can't explain this, but of course our loved ones are still connected to us, and they reach out, and they will keep on reaching out, just like your grandfather, you know is like, well, in
Yeah.
case you wanted to push that away,
Yeah.
let's just put that knife
Well,
on the
it's so
table.
crazy too, because like his message was like, you're gonna have to take this knife and you're gonna have to go out and create your own path. Like you're gonna go out there in the jungle and you're gonna slay everything that's gonna be resisting you, and you're gonna have to create it for yourself. Um, yeah, I mean it's pretty intense. And I mean, Jocelyn, for you to be able to have this experience while you're in such a sensitive environment, like one your hospital, and watching your husband go through these procedures and everything that happens in that type of life situation, like you to be able to have Catherine as a tool to help you connect with Kevin. I mean, that is amazing.
If I hadn't had Catherine um, doing her thing while he was in the hospital, and then after he died, I would have had a completely different experience, and I wouldn't have the perspective on just life that I do now. It would definitely changed me for the
Yeah.
better. I I used to be a lot more high strung and some other things, but the whole experience definitely changed me for the better, and I couldn't have done it without Catherine.
What about
And
sharing your story? Sorry, Catherine, I didn't
oh, I
mean to
was just
cut you
going to
off.
say, and like Kevin, like just like our loved ones are so wanting to impart to us. So Kevin was always, and you read the book, you see Kevin is so focused on Jocelyn and helping her go through this experience and her grief and parenting and all that she's going to face, um and and giving her guidance, and giving her strength, because our loved ones do love us and they want. So it's good that we want it. We would love to have that connection, but we also, they want, like your grandfather wanted you to be encouraged, to be emboldened, all those things, in a way that maybe somebody else could have talked to you about that, but it wouldn't have meant as much as someone who loves you dearly and it's like, I really want to be sure I let him know these things. That's that heart to heart communication that's in the title of our book.
Yeah, I love it. Heart to heart journey through death and the afterlife. I highly suggest everyone pick it up. The main title is Beyond Ever After. Um, Jocelyn, like, were you hesitant at all about putting this in a book?
Yes. I was. In fact, Catherine had asked me if I wanted to help her write it, and I said no. But you're welcome to use my story. And I have to say, Catherine has hundreds and hundreds of stories that are similar to mine. I'm not the only person that's had this experience with her by a long shot. And when she had come down to the UCLA writing that's in the book, I think it's the third one. I said, God, you should write a book about this stuff, because I was just so blown away by the whole experience. I mean, to go from just being very of this earth and not really, believing in other things, and to just be completely transformed and all the things that I got out of it, and knowing that she'd done this for so many other people, I said, you should write a book about this. And if you want to, I'll sign away where you can use my story, because I'm just so grateful and it's so amazing. And so then she came to me later on and said that she had gotten the nudge from God that she should get a story out there, and this is the one that she wanted to tell. And so she asked me if I wanted to help her, and I said no. And I think it's because I just wasn't ready to kind of relive the whole thing, and I knew that that's what it would be like. And so I just said no, I wasn't interested. And then we went to a Mary Morrissey conference. Do you know who she is? Mary Morrissey. Catherine, how do you?
Yeah, she's worked with Bob Proctor. She was like the front runner of New Thought. I mean, there's so many people that are life coaches. She was life coaching before life coaching was a thing, So
what's her name again?
Mary Morrissey, and she does a Dream Builder Live program, and Brave Thinking Masters Institute. And so she is Les Brown. She was taught and she was invited to a group. I'm not sure what the gentleman's name was, but she was in a group for many years of 3 young people, Wayne Dyer, Les Brown, and her, that worked with so they were the front runners of all the kinds of people that we see now doing, life coaching.
Yeah, life coaching. I love Wayne Dyer. He's one of my favorites.
So, and they would meet with this gentleman. Yeah.
Wow.
And she still does these events. I just did one a couple months ago. So
cool.
We went to one.
How was that?
Jocelyn, tell her.
So she dragged me to this Mary Morrissey conference, and I said, I don't like that kind of stuff, and I'll just bring my book, and if I'm not interested, I'll sit in the lobby and read my novels for the weekend. But it was great, and it was all about like, what do you want in your life, and what do you want to do with your life, and what's your dream, and how do you achieve it? And at the time, I really didn't have any. I mean, I was just kind of going through the motions after Kevin died, and it just felt like putting on a brave face for the kids and getting the laundry done was a huge, accomplishment. And I didn't really think about what I wanted to do. And then when we were driving home, I just said to her, Catherine, if you want to write that book, I'll help you now. And so then I thought about like how to start it. And then it came to me when I was in the car, and Something in the Way She Moves from James Taylor was on, which is one of Kevin's favorite songs for me. And I got the idea about how to start it. And so I went home and I just started writing it, and sent Catherine a couple pages and said, okay, I just wrote the first chapter. And then I quit my job the next day or that week and just stayed home and wrote the book. And had I known, I think if I'd really thought about other people reading it, I wouldn't have been so like forthcoming in it, because it's really personal. And I'm not a personal person. I don't like people knowing stuff about me, and I just laid it all out there. I mean, like kind of like naked running down State Street in Santa Barbara. I just felt really exposed. And had I known, if I'd really thought about it, I probably would have done it differently and not been so raw.
I say this, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad that you were raw, right? I'm glad that you were very open and vulnerable in this, because it helped me connect with it, right? Like, I was like, Kevin's got to be like the best husband I ever read in a book, because like some of the stuff he's writing, I'm like, my wife's looking at me like shaking her head. She's like, you never write like that. I'm like, man. But no, the story is amazing.
Wonderful. He was wonderful. And I got to say, I don't like being vulnerable. So when you said that, it just made all my little,
well, here's the thing, right? Like, I think the most common theme that I take away from a lot of authors that come on here is that they write a book, and then before it gets published, or when it gets published, they are scared to death, because that's when they realize that people are going to read it. Same thing with me. Like, the first episode I published of a podcast, I'm like, can't think about it. I just got to hit publish because I know people are going to listen to this. My parents are going to listen to this. Like I'm, and now that I've done, 170 plus of these, it's like, second nature. But I'm very happy that you were transparent, that you were very vulnerable and open, because the energy that you put out into the world, that energy is real, and it's in this book, and people will attract that energy, and it will help many, many people who are in your, maybe not in your situation, but in a situation where they're going to lose someone, and maybe look for some help somewhere they might not necessarily have looked if it wasn't, for your bravery, if it wasn't for this book. And it might help them deal with a loss of someone by reaching out to someone like Catherine, who has a gift like this, or someone who is in this type of field, and be able to cope with losing someone, but not really losing someone, because they're always there, right? Like, I mean, this is why I appreciate books like this.
They are. And with COVID right now in these times, and people just feeling so hopeless about everything. And, everyone, I don't know anyone that hasn't lost someone or knows someone who's been sick. And I think it's pretty much touched everyone, and also the isolation that we've all felt this last year. And, the book, I think, especially in these times, can give people hope, even if they haven't lost a loved one, because it just, everyone who reads it just always tells both of us that they just have a different perspective on life and what happens. And it made them feel not so worried and more at peace and have hope. And I think these days, people could really use that.
Sure. Absolutely. Catherine, when like you said, you found this in graduate school, how long before you started putting putting things out like that, like a book, or like having sessions, or helping other people deal with these types of situations?
I had been working with clients since it arrived, friends of friends, that kind of thing. This really is the first book of this kind, because, as you were saying earlier, I was like, oh yeah, I'm really going to go out there and say, oh yeah, I talk to dead people and people in comas and God, and so I work by referral only. And so but I was very off the grid. And so the book goes out there, and now it's like, oh yeah, and now I'm endeavoring to do that because, just as Jocelyn said, I have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions with people. And, I know that this isn't the only show in town. I know Proof Positive. And I just want to get those messages out there, because also I think we all have this capacity, all of us. I do something very unique, right? But I think that we all have that capability. And for us to be okay, for us to have these dialogues, I just did for the very first time a live writing for like 60 people on Valentine's Day. And I had invited someone who hadn't read the book, who knew me, but didn't know my work or anything. And she was like, oh my gosh, wow, what is that? And then she said she was talking to a friend of hers right after that. And she said, I was a little spaced out afterwards. And she was telling the friend about it. And the friend started telling her about how she had had all these supernatural kind of unexplainable experiences. And she said, I've known this woman for 20 years. And she talked to me for an hour and a half, telling me all these things she's never spoken to anyone about. So I hope that we can normalize this as much, or at least take the love and the feeling and the sentiment of these kinds of experiences, and know that we're not limited in the ways that we think we are, and it doesn't have to be spooky or, a ghost or, all the things we think of. Yeah. It's part of us. It's our loving heart. It's our essence. We're designed like this, I believe. So.
No, I agree. I think, I hate to say it, but there's an underground that is, it's coming out. Like you see a lot of this, this type of I guess people are just very intrigued because, like, I think they're getting, not bored, but they're getting tired of all the dogmatic type of, belief systems. And this right here, it makes you feel good because I feel like this is we're more connected to this. I mean, my energy is just always whenever I'm talking to people like yourself, Catherine, or hearing your stories, Jocelyn, like I get fired up because it's like, man, there is something so much more out there than what we've always been taught. Like there's this energy out there, and I'm excited to explore it. Psychology is now stepping into a world of new therapy with psychedelics, right?
Right. Yeah.
And we're right at the we're at we're in the baby steps of trying to make that mainstream. And Johns Hopkins of Baltimore, where I'm at, is doing a lot of research and experiments with that and therapy with PTSD, alcoholism, and addiction. And it's just, like I was looking at the numbers the other day, and the mystical experiences, it's phenomenal. I think like after they're only giving 12 doses maximum along the entire experiment, but it's like the recovery rate it's like, I want to say it's 59% for a lot of PTSD people that are suffering with that. Like, so it's the numbers, the data is very impressive. So yeah, I'm excited where we're going.
And
Go
we
ahead.
have those experiences where we think of somebody from 20 years ago, and then all of a sudden they call us, so we know that there's something more, like we're able to span some sort of space-time distance. And we just go like, well, that's so strange. I was just thinking about that and so all of us have those experiences. So why not? Why can't we be, our superior selves?
There you go. I like that.
Why can't we just step into it? It doesn't mean like I'm superior to you.
Yeah.
Look at me. It's not about the ego, but it's about
It's not about the ego. It's about getting, for me, it's getting rid of that ego. It's forgetting.
Right.
It's like, well, it's more or less like identifying the ego of what it is and realizing what the thoughts are and what the body is doing because of the ego. Like, that one mindedness or that, meditation where you're just trying to connect with the universal consciousness is what I'm trying to achieve. And the ego, like I thought I was the ego for a long time. Seriously. Like I just thought that I was. And through different practices and methods, I've been able to sometimes transcend that. And it's a whole different world on the other side for sure. But getting back to the book, because I can talk about that all night. Jocelyn, Kevin, right? Like, do you, well, let me ask you this. So like you were very analytical before. What are you like, where are you at right now as far as, where you're at in your life?
Well, I mean, I'm still analytical. I think that just my personality, but I'm not so strident about things for sure. And I'm not so linear about everything because everything isn't like that. I didn't think that before, but you can't have this experience and not have it completely transform you. And so just even though I'm still an analytical person, I just have such a more expansive view of everything that I guess I analyze it within that context, and which mainly means that most things I'm analyzing and thinking about don't even really matter because it's not a big deal. They're all small potatoes in the scheme of things. When you go through this experience and you lose your husband or your partner, someone you love, in a really bad way. I mean, there's some deaths that are less. I mean, all deaths are traumatic, I think, but when you have to watch someone kind of suffer their way through it and you suffer right along with them, it's just, I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm getting with that, but.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough.
It's tough. It's really tough. And I knew where I was going with that, but when you go through that experience, all the other stuff that life throws at you just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Like I was just texting my son about this yesterday about, how, because he said, God, I wish I was like you and I didn't sweat the small stuff. And I said, I don't sweat the small stuff or the big stuff, like things that people really fret about, like, wrecking their car or something. I'm just like, are you okay? That's all that matters. It's just a car. And you bet most things that people think are important, I just don't think are important anymore.
Yeah, because we get caught up in the moment too much, right? Or we get caught up. I shouldn't say that. We should be
In the
caught up
minutia, you get
Yeah,
caught up in the minutia of life, and life is about the big picture. It's not about the minutia. But I think people get so focused on the minutia, they never look at the big picture. It's like they can't see the forest through the trees.
And that was a really big departure. There was going through this experience, and not just losing Kevin, but Kevin walking her, holding her hand through this experience. And the book does that. But all the years, I mean, we've done what, 54 writings or something, and there's 6 in the book. So he was the faith-filled one. He was the believer. She was like, I don't believe in any of this. And so he wanted her to have that belief system. That's what he wanted her to have, hope and faith and belief. And, he managed to do that. I mean, spirit, his blessing, whatever, however fate and the universe collided, she got this experience, and he was the one who delivered it to her. And he knew all her areas of resistance, and he knew, and he walked her through it. And so it was a horrible loss, but his goal, his desire was to see her transformed. And sure, it came in a really crazy kind of way that seems so like, really, this really happened? It's a totally true story.
Yeah. He
But
was telling her what she needed to hear, right?
and knowing how she was and how resistant, and you can imagine, here I am, I don't know either one of them, and I'm stuck in between them, 2 lawyers duking it out with each other. He's like, take me to hospice. She's like, no, I'm taking you home. I'm taking you home. And of course, he's unconscious, and I'm facilitating that communication. But yeah. And she's like, no, I'm not going to call. He's like, pick up the phone, get the phone, dial it now, So,
so amazing that I forgot about the hospice thing. Like, he wanted to go to hospice, but Jocelyn, you wanted him to go back home to where home was. And explain that a little bit for the listeners.
Well, when he was at UCLA, he'd been there after the first writing, when he thought he was dreaming, and this is a whole nother conversation, but he thought he was dreaming, and he was able to conduct an experiment and kind of wake himself up. And then he realized he wasn't dreaming. And so he said, okay, since I know I'm not dreaming, I'm going to try to wake myself up from this. And over the next week or so, he started to get better. A speech therapist came in, he could talk back and forth, he could lift one thumb and the other thumb and do the commands and stuff. And so we went to rehab at UCLA to get him kind of more functioning. But after a week in rehab, he started to go downhill again, and was kind of back to where he was, basically comatose by the end of the 2 weeks at rehab. And so they told me that they just had to, that there was nothing left, no medical treatment left for him, and that I just either needed to take him home or send him to a skilled nursing facility, which I wasn't going to do. So I was going to bring him home, and the day before I was going to bring him home, Catherine called and said, I'm getting this feeling that I should come down and do another writing. And I said, look, I'd love to have one, but I'm going to be home tomorrow. It can just wait till then. And she kept being persistent about it, which is really unlike her with something like this. She just offers, and, but she doesn't like say, no, I really think I should do this, but she did. And I really didn't want to do it. I think I was afraid of what she was going to say, that I was going to hear that things were worse than I was willing to let myself believe, because, realistically looking at him, he was back in a coma. Things obviously weren't going well, or even as well as they had been a few weeks before. And so, but anyway, she came down. My sister Vicky drove her because she had a detached retina, and she came down and did another writing. And in it, Kevin said, look, please don't take me home. I want to go to the hospice facility and die there. And I was just like, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. I had a plan. I didn't want to deviate from him. I don't like people telling me what to do, even him. And, when I think something should go a certain way, it's pretty hard to unstick me from that, although I'm a lot easier about that now. But at the time I was just like, no way. And I just wanted him to come home. In my head, I thought all he needs is some rest. This is hospitals. They wake you up every 15 minutes. I was exhausted from sleeping with him in the hospital bed these 6 weeks. We were both really tired. And I just thought he needed to go home, and he didn't want to do that. And so Catherine came down, and in the writing, he made me basically call hospice and see if they had a bed, which they did. And we went there the next day. And then after that writing, which was like 2.5 hours long, it was really long. That's the second writing in the book. When we were taking him back to his room, I was able to get the MRI results back from the nurse of the MRI they had taken the day before. Because Kevin had been telling me, look, I'm not going to make it. I'm dying. You've got to let me go. You got to let me die. Don't keep screaming. No, no, no. I can't leave you if you're like that. You've got to come to accept that it's not going to turn out how you want it to turn out. Anyway, so when we went back towards the room, I was able to get the results of the MRI, and the tumor was back, and it was bigger than it had been when they'd taken it out 2 months before. And they just, said, that's it. He's going to be dead within a couple months. But I knew myself it would be much quicker than that, because he said, once I'm in hospice and you accepted this, which I think you're getting close to now, that's going to be it. He couldn't believe he was still breathing with how little brain matter he had going as it was.
Wow.
And when she said he was saying this, of course he was saying this all
right. I'm sorry, that's my bad. I always just say, well, he was saying this and he was saying that, because I'm so used to the process with Catherine, but it's not that. She feels his energy, she communicates it. But it's funny, because when she's doing it and as she reads it back to you, what she's written, because she writes like so fast you can hardly believe it, and then she reads it back and she'll use the same intonation and word choice, and she sounds like a female version of how Kevin would talk, just like the inflections and the way, because people's voices go up and down and things like that. And it just was like so spot on. If it was just a little lower, it would have been just like him.
Well, did you feel uncomfortable at first, like talking to her like you were talking to Kevin?
Well, you do, until the first second that that it's that person. So when she was the first writing, when she started with there's always a God introduction in them, and she's reading it back to me, I was just like, yeah. And then she's writing some more. But as soon as he said, it's me, and I asked him that test question and he gave me the answer, I knew it was him. And it's like, you just immediately, it's so weird, because you think it's going to be really strange, but when you're doing it, it just seems like the most natural thing in the world.
And this was all on the phone. And then he roused himself while we were on the phone. He roused himself out of his coma. Wow. And I was in Washington State on vacation, and she was.
That's right. Yeah. Now I remember the part in the book.
We weren't even together or whatever. And then he's like, I can move my finger. And her sister was with him at the hospital, and Jocelyn had gone to a landline at her hotel. And then her sister's like, he's tapping, he's holding my hand, he's doing this. And Jocelyn's like, I got to get off the phone. I got to get over there,
So you're on vacation and Jocelyn was on the phone, and you guys were kind of like doing it from afar. And then Kevin was responding to what he was saying to you, Catherine, that when you were away in a long distance, Kevin was there. His energy was there talking to you. We were talking to Jocelyn. And so your sister Jocelyn was at the hospital confirming all the movements that Kevin was doing with his finger. So basically proving or supporting the fact that Kevin was there with Catherine, and by the confirmation of the movements in his finger. That is insane. Like, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And roused himself. And Jocelyn's like, if he's waking up, I got to be there, because it had been 26 days.
Well, what did Kevin, and I don't know which one to ask here, but what did Kevin, how did he describe the other side?
Catherine, do you want to take that?
Well, I mean, when he described what it was like to be in the coma, like he said, it was kind of electrical and sparks and this is what I hope that your listeners or viewers get. He was in a coma, but he was still having experiences. And I mean, I've worked with comatose people before, and a lot of people who die are already dead and their loved ones, they're talking to them and they talk about conversations that they've had on the deathbed. And so when people are in coma, they do hear you. So, and that, I mean, I've had that happen hundreds of times where they'll say, well, when you told me this or when you said that, and it's not like I love you, don't die. It's not some generic thing. It's something very specific. So if you have a loved one, you know, that you're FaceTiming with who's got COVID or whatever, and they hear you, they know. So he talked about that. And then afterwards, after he died, Jocelyn did another session, another writing, and he talked to her, you know, about meeting Jesus, because he was a very Christian. Her husband was very Christian. And so he talked about that. But everybody has a different afterlife experience. Sure. You're a Buddha, you're not meeting Jesus. I mean, maybe you are, but you know, I mean, everybody, it's so unique, their afterlife experience. I can't tell you.
How do you feel after a reading? Are you just like spent? Like, does it take a lot of energy?
No, not at all. No, not at all. Because it's almost like sitting at a table and having coffee. It's not it's not much different than what we're doing now, really. Sure. Right, Jocelyn? I mean, it's just, it's very normal. And for me, it's kind of like sensing the individual from the inside out. It's a different experience of an energy of a person than what, like, you know, conversing with people in the 3D reality, for lack of I don't even know how to describe this. But no, it is not at all. And I'm always so amazed. I mean, I'm just always so amazed at the God source part is just metaphorical and never repeated, and just like words that just drip like amber off trees. And what the people say, and people do, they look at me like, oh, because, and I'm like, I don't, you know, it's almost like I've gone through their underwear drawer. It's like, I don't know what this means either. Right. You know, It's like, I get the parts that I get, but, you know, but people think like, well, there's no possible way you can know this, you know, so you must know everything. So
what's the biggest piece of insight, or what's the biggest revelation that you've had throughout your entire experience with this gift?
That we're all human, and that we're all dealing with the same stuff, that we all deal with the same stuff, you know, that we think our pain is unique, and it is unique to us, but that there's this humanity in each of us. There's these fears, these things, and that the power of love, and that we are fully resourced. We are fully resourced within ourselves, our spirits, our soul. And we are really amazing. And all people really, you know, so I would say just our humanity and our divinity, and how that just merges in places, you know, it's like people who deal with worthiness issues, you know, it's kind of like, it's the same way. We're divine and we're human. And that gives us so much more, I don't want to call them superpowers, but just powers, just resources, you know, and I get to see that. People healing, people getting free, people just shifting. Like when I work with people, they could have a block forever, and then they're just like, why would I do this stupid thing that doesn't work for me anymore? And they shift, and they, you know, so I would say that's what I see. And the love. I mean, I think it's the love, you know, it really comes down to it.
I think it is
It's
love.
the most powerful thing, really, in accessing that within ourselves and with the people we love, you know.
In the book, Catherine, as you know, you've read it, Trey, but you know, I give kind of the backstory and just the factual parts. But Catherine talks about all this stuff and also, makes it in context to what Kevin is saying. So there's a lot of, that kind of content in there that people really resonate with, because it gets them thinking about things in a way that they might not otherwise.
Sure. Well, speaking of that, Jocelyn, do you have like a website, or do you have a way that people can communicate with you if they're going through something like this? Or is it just, do you have a website or anything people can follow you at?
We do, Catherine.
BeyondEverAfter.com. And yes. And we have an option to share your story on there, because some people have had these experiences and they've never talked to anybody about them before. So we also have that opportunity.
And I will always email you back.
Yeah, she's the one who does all the emailing back. So
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Big question. Last question for both of you. Start with Jocelyn. Jocelyn, what do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. I've never really thought about that. I guess what I would want my legacy to be was that that I'm a kind person, and to people I know and people I don't know, and that I'm a good human being, and that I'm a great mother and a loyal friend.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Catherine?
I guess what I want my legacy to be is to really invite and inspire people to realize how amazing we each are, and how resilient and how loving, and how we are so much larger than the things that happen to us in our lives. And that if we don't, feel like we've lived our purpose or made our mark, or whatever stick we're beating ourselves with, whatever day of the week it is, that showing up and loving and all of it, and it doesn't end. When our life ends, we just go to a different experience. And also take care of your stuff now, because when you die, you go there, and you're kind of sitting there, and you can't blame it on your boss anymore, or your whatever. It's so, everything's expanded, and love and connection are just, they're the greatest forces in the universe. And that people would realize how powerful and capable and connected and loving, no matter what they've gone through or what they've done or who they are, that our essence and our soul essence continues on. And
well, let me ask you this. So you said take care of this stuff now. How do you deal with that stuff now, though? That's the biggest thing for me, at least.
Well,
anyway.
I think a lot of it is to realize that we think we have tomorrows, we think we have all the time. It's just accepting responsibility for oneself, and sometimes that's going into the pain, sometimes going into the darkness. Sometimes it's different for everyone, but I think a lot of people go, I just don't want to feel this, so I'm just going to try to block it. And I just say yes to your life. Say yes to your life, even if it means pain is always got, healing on the other side. So, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to the shitty hands people get dealt in life. Everybody's got stuff. So I'm not saying,
Sure.
Spoonful of sugar, and, I'm not being unrealistic about that, but being willing to just say, yeah, this really is hurting me. And I can dig deep and find some resilience, or find some help, or find some angels, or, and there are those people who love us that are gone before us, that are rooting for us. We've got cheering sections, and say, I don't know how to do this. Help me, and if that's your faith, or that's your deceased loved ones, or it's all of it, or it's your therapist, or, whatever.
Or it's Catherine. Yeah. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fantastic. This has gone by way too quick. I enjoyed speaking with each of you, and I cannot wait for people to go and get this book and hear their comments about it. Again, it's Beyond Ever After. Phenomenal book. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show and sharing this story. Jocelyn, thank you for being vulnerable and allowing the world to hear your story and to feel that energy. And Catherine, thank you for sharing your gift.
Well, thanks for having us. It was great.
Yeah, thanks, Trey.